My daughter said, "You're too old to fly with us, just take care of the house." The brochure felt smooth between my fingers, its glossy finish still warm from the sunlight filtering in through the kitchen window. Maui. Golden beaches, endless blue waves, hula shows under starlit skies. The kind of place Sarah and I used to dream of. The kind of place I had never seen. "That's the resort," Lauren said, pointing excitedly at a photo of a private villa. 4 bedrooms, a full chef's kitchen, and it's walking distance from the beach. Her husband Bradley leaned in, nodding. "It even has snorkeling gear provided. Walter and Margaret are going to lose it when they see this." Walter and Margaret. Bradley's parents. The same age as me, or older in fact, but somehow they were going on this trip. I was not. I let the words sit on my tongue before saying them, careful and slow. "That sounds lovely. When do we?" Before I could finish, Lauren reached across the table and gently slid the brochure from my hands, like taking candy from a child. "You're not coming, Mom," she said, all brightness gone from her voice. "You're too old for that kind of travel." Her tone was sweet, dismissive. She didn't even look me in the eye when she said it. Bradley was too busy pulling up flight confirmations on his phone. His father was sprawled on my couch, talking about how he hoped the pineapple tasted better than last time. "I've never been to Hawaii," I said. It came out more fragile than I meant. Bradley shrugged. "You'll get your time, Elaine. This trip is just, kind of for us." Us. The word echoed, hollow and sharp. Before we continue, can I kindly ask, if this story resonates with you, or if you've ever been underestimated in your own home, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps keep these stories alive, and we'd love to have you along for the journey. Let us know where you're listening from too. Back in that kitchen though. I just nodded. I've learned to nod when the world spins too quickly, when dignity is the only thing left to hold on to. "You can house sit," Lauren added. "You'll love the quiet, won't you?" They laughed. Even Margaret joined in, and she'd only been in my home a handful of times, always wearing too much perfume and talking over everyone at dinner. Bradley raised his coffee mug like it was a champagne flute. "To family vacations." Their laughter rang through my kitchen like a door slamming shut. I excused myself politely, the same way I did when I was still teaching and had to walk out of meetings where men half my age talked over me. I climbed the stairs slowly, every step reminding me that yes, I was 62, but not broken. When I reached my bedroom, I closed the door softly behind me. It was the same room Sarah and I had shared for 31 years. Her chair still sat by the window, though the cushions had faded in the sun. Her favorite scarf was still tucked in the drawer of my vanity. She would have fought for me. Sarah would have looked Lauren in the eye and said, "He goes or no one goes." But Sarah was 5 years gone, and now my daughter treated me like an inconvenience. A housekeeper in retirement. I stood at the window and watched Bradley and Lauren load shopping bags into the car. The bags were full of travel clothes and beach essentials, items paid for by my electricity, my water, my roof. Downstairs, their voices grew louder again. The vents in this old house carry sound too well. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. Not at first. "Honestly," Bradley said, "she bought that whole too old excuse." "She always was a bit gullible," Lauren replied with a soft giggle. "Remember how she believed we'd pay her back for the kitchen remodel?" The blood in my veins chilled. "The timing works out perfectly," Walter chimed in. "After the trip, we can finally move forward with that plan. Sunset Grove has an opening next month." Sunset Grove. A nursing facility. Margaret's voice followed. "If we pay the deposit now, they'll expedite her placement. It's better for everyone. She's had her time." Had my time? I couldn't breathe. "I spoke with the realtor," Lauren added. "Zachary Allen. He thinks we could list this place at $900,000. Probably get more." Bradley laughed. "Split it 4 ways?" "Obviously," Lauren said. "Mom and Dad deserve their cut for putting up with her." "Entitlement is wild," Margaret chuckled. Like she really thought she was going with us. Their laughter wasn't loud this time. It was soft, private. Like a secret kept just out of reach. They thought I couldn't hear them. But I did. I sat on the bed, my knees trembling. I had housed them for 5 years. Paid for their repairs. covered their bills, cooked their meals, smiled through their rudeness, nodded through their arrogance. Sarah once told me that silence can be powerful, but only when it's broken at the right moment. I stood up, walked to the dresser. Beneath Sarah's old wedding ring and the faded birthday cards from Lauren's childhood, I kept one thing in a velvet folder. The deed. To this house. My house. Mine. I traced my name on the document slowly, grounding myself. Elaine Dawson. I wasn't invisible. Not anymore. I barely slept that night. I wandered from room to room like a ghost in my own home, each creak of the floorboards whispering reminders of how little my presence mattered to the people beneath this roof. I stood for an hour in Sarah's old sewing room, fingers brushing the edge of her fabric drawers, remembering how she used to hum softly while threading her needle. She never once called me a burden. Not even when her pain was unbearable. Not even when I had to carry her to the bathroom in the end. Now here I was, alive, able, and apparently obsolete. By dawn, I'd already boiled the kettle, sorted the recycling, and sat through 3 cups of tea that tasted like betrayal. I didn't cry. My tears had been rationed for Sarah's funeral and the nights that followed, not for ungrateful children who saw me as property to be managed. I needed a plan. But revenge wasn't the right word for what brewed inside me. It wasn't spiteful. It wasn't violent. It was restorative. Like a balance that needed correcting. Like gravity finally pulling down what had floated too high for too long. At 6:03 a.m., I called Marilyn. She answered on the first ring, her voice alert and sharp despite the hour. Elaine? You all right? I need a buyer, I said. Discreet. Quick. Cash, if possible. There was a beat of silence, then a low whistle. So it's finally happening. I'm done being walked over. I've got just the couple, she said. No agents. No inspections. They'll offer full asking and let you stay till you sort the next move. I'm ready now. We ended the call in under 3 minutes. I loved that about Marilyn. No theatrics. Just action. She and Sarah had been friends for 30 years. They'd built this community brick by brick, PTA meetings, church bazaars, neighborhood watches. When Sarah died, Marilyn delivered soup for a week straight and never once asked me how I was doing. She knew I wouldn't know how to answer. By 10 a.m., the buyers came by, a young couple with a toddler asleep in a car seat. The wife had kind eyes and the man nodded respectfully. They didn't even go upstairs. They stood in the living room where Sarah and I once slow danced to Ella Fitzgerald, looked around and said, "We'll take it." The deposit hit my account before Lauren's return flight touched down. I spent the next 48 hours packing. Not everything. Just the things that mattered, Sarah's letters, the photo albums, my mother's locket, the retirement journal I'd kept for 30 years and never showed anyone. I donated most of the furniture. Marilyn's son helped load my things into storage, asking 0 questions. When I left that house for the final time, I didn't look back. I rented a cozy garden flat 2 towns over, with sunlit windows and a modest backyard. The landlord was a retired librarian who baked too much banana bread and insisted I call her B. I told her I was starting over. She nodded like she understood. And then I waited. 10 days passed. The day they returned from Hawaii, my phone buzzed violently on the kitchen counter, for missed calls, then 8, then 19. By dinner, it had climbed to 43. I finally answered on the 44th. Mom. Lauren's voice cracked. What happened to the house? Our house. Ah, I said, sipping my tea. You mean my house? You sold it. I did. You had no right. I had every right, darling, I said, voice steady. The deed was in my name. The taxes in my name. The repairs, the groceries, the utilities, every line item mine. But, where are you? Somewhere warm. Peaceful. The kind of place that doesn't echo with lies. There was a silence so deep, I could hear the hum of Lauren's confusion turn into a low, simmering fury. You blindsided us. I learned from the best. But what about our stuff? I believe the Mitchells took a few suitcases to Hawaii, I said calmly. Everything else was left behind. Perhaps the new owners will find use for it. Do you know how hard this makes everything? Bradley's job, the kids' school, Then I suggest you do what I did for decades, I said. Figure it out. She started to cry. Real tears or performance, I couldn't tell. It didn't matter. I always thought you loved us, she whispered. I do, I said. Which is why I won't let you treat me like luggage left behind at the gate. I ended the call. Then I turned off the phone. That night, I sat under the stars in my new backyard, wrapped in a fleece shawl Sarah had knitted during her last winter. The sky was darker here. No airplanes overhead, no sirens, no entitled footsteps pacing my hallway. And for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. But it wasn't over. Lauren would come looking. Bradley would shout. The Mitchells would sneer and call lawyers. I knew that. What they didn't know was that I had more than just the house. I had a bank account Lauren didn't know existed, with the pension Sarah and I tucked away for emergencies. I had access to all the email records of Bradley's remote job, which I suspected wasn't as remote, or legal, as he claimed. And I had one more surprise they'd never see coming. I opened the small metal box on my nightstand and removed a flash drive. Inside were copies of every conversation I'd recorded from the heating vents in that house, clear, time-stamped, and damning. I hadn't just listened. I'd documented. Tomorrow, I'd take that flash drive to a lawyer. And then, we'd talk about what justice really meant. They had no idea I'd already left the house. By the time Bradley's voice boomed up the stairwell, Elaine? We're heading to the airport. I was 2 counties away, heading west with nothing but Sarah's locket, a zipped overnight bag, and a plan as cold and precise as the wind slicing through the trees that December morning. Let them think I was tucked neatly into the background like a forgotten quilt. Let them believe I was sitting by the fireplace with a crossword and herbal tea, waiting to be shelved in a care facility like a dusty book. I wasn't. Because what Lauren and Bradley didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that in the last 6 months, I'd made several quiet moves. Changes to my estate. Updated beneficiaries. New will. And most importantly, the deed. The house no longer belonged to me. Not in the way they assumed. I sold it, quietly, efficiently, and legally. Not to some corporate developer or real estate shark. No, I sold it to someone who actually valued legacy, my old student, Rosalie Lynn. She was now a civil rights attorney, doing good in the world, the kind of person Sarah would have rooted for. She'd offered a fair price and insisted I remain in the home as long as I liked. The documents had been signed 2 weeks earlier. Rosalie even hugged me when the deal closed. You're not just selling a house, she said. You're giving me a story, Ms. Dawson. And I'll protect it. And with those papers, every plan Lauren had made, every whisper about nursing homes and split inheritances, turned to ash. They'd come back to ashes. I reached the cabin in Grey Pines by noon. It belonged to a retired librarian friend who now lived with her sister in Florida. I'd agreed to care for the place in exchange for full privacy. It was nestled between pine trees, the kind of location you'd miss if you blinked. I parked under the overhang, unlocked the creaking wooden door, and inhaled the smell of cedar and thyme. Then, with the snow beginning to fall, I lit the fireplace, brewed a cup of tea, and finally allowed the stillness to hold me. By sunset, my phone had 17 missed calls. By midnight, 43. Lauren first. Then Bradley. Then both of them alternating like some dysfunctional duet. The first voicemail was chipper. Hey Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. We're in Oahu now. So beautiful here. You wouldn't believe the sunset. Anyway, talk soon. Click. The next was from Bradley. Hi Elaine. Just wondering if you remembered to take the bins out. Also, if the mail comes, please don't lose anything important this time. Click. The third? A bit more serious. Mom, it's Lauren. Call us when you get this. We're having some weird issues with the house. That was where the fun began. Because what they didn't know, yet, was that Rosalie had arranged for a team to visit the house during their absence. Contractors. Locksmiths. Legal service. All completely authorized. The locks were changed, the utilities updated, and a large sign now stood in the yard. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. According to Rosalie's text, Bradley had attempted to unlock the front door upon their return. The key didn't work. He pounded. Lauren screamed. A neighbor, unaware of the details, called the police. By the time they reached voicemail number 12, the tone had shifted. You had no right, Mom. This was our house. You had no right. Lauren's voice cracked with fury. This is unbelievable. Bradley's message, recorded 1 minute later, was worse. How could you do this to your own daughter? We're stranded. We have no place to go. Click. I played it again, this time sipping my tea. Jasmine. Sarah's favorite. There was something satisfying about the clarity of consequence. About letting people face the echo of their own choices. But it wasn't just the house. That was the beginning. The second part of my plan was quieter, but far more permanent. I'd revised every document. Removed Lauren as medical power of attorney. Reassigned financial rights. Closed the joint credit card account she didn't know I was tracking. Not a single utility remained in my name. The home Lauren assumed would magically revert to her one day? Sold. The estate she hoped to liquidate for her own gain? Legally diverted. Every memory she mocked, every sacrifice she dismissed, that was what she traded for a vacation and a mock toast to my absence. Voicemail 35 was nearly whispered. Mom, please. We're at a hotel. I need to understand what's happening. You've always been kind. You've always been soft. Why are you doing this? That made me laugh. Soft? No, sweetheart. I was never soft. I was generous, patient, trusting. There's a difference. You mistook the light for weakness. At 11:41 p.m., I finally responded with one message, short and measured. Lauren, I received your calls. I'm safe. I hope your trip was memorable. Please do not return to my home. It's no longer yours to return to. Click. That was it. In the following days, Rosalie's team would handle the legal pushback. They'd expected it. Lauren and Bradley could throw their tantrums in the wind. The law was not on their side. What remained for me was something far more valuable than any house. My peace. My dignity. And the knowledge that, even if they saw me as disposable, I had not disposed of myself. I watched the fire glow into embers that night, the storm outside thickening. Somewhere, Lauren and Bradley were pacing a hotel hallway, trying to explain to Walter and Margaret why their inheritance had vanished. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But justice doesn't come with apologies. It comes with a quiet mirror held up to cruelty, and the refusal to ever let it define you again. The knock came 3 days later. I was watching birds glide across the frozen lake behind the cabin, cup of cocoa in hand, when the sound cracked through the silence like a shot. Sharp. Unmistakable. Not the polite rhythm of a neighbor. No, this was angry. Fast. Determined. I didn't move at first. Let them knock. I had a guess who it was. Another round of thudding followed, louder this time. Elaine? Mom? Lauren's voice, muffled through the door. So, they'd found me. I stood slowly, setting my mug down on the windowsill, and walked toward the door. My heartbeat was steady, calm, the same way it had been the day I'd changed everything. When I opened the door, Lauren stood there in a knee-length camel coat, arms crossed, cheeks flushed not from cold, but from embarrassment. Behind her, Bradley looked up from his phone, startled. His expression tightened like he hadn't expected I'd open the door at all. Lauren blinked first. You're here, she said. I am, I replied. Can we come in? I looked past her to the snow-covered road. No car in sight. Did you walk from town? No, Bradley said. Uber. Of course. I stepped aside but didn't say a word. Let them enter on silence. The room smelled of firewood and lemon polish. Warmth. Stability. Everything they'd mistaken as theirs to exploit. They sat stiffly on the plaid couch near the fireplace, the same way kids do before a lecture they know is coming. I remained standing. Lauren glanced around, her lips twitching. It's rustic. It's quiet, I said. Bradley jumped in. Okay, look. We need to talk. We were blindsided when we came back. I mean what you did. What I did. I raised an eyebrow. He hesitated. Yes. The house. The deed. Everything. You could have just told us. And would that have changed anything? Silence. I stepped closer, hands folded calmly. You were planning to move me into a nursing home without my consent. You researched it. You budgeted it. You even called a realtor. All while I cooked your meals, paid your bills, and kept the house you lived in clean and functioning. Lauren's face flushed. It wasn't like that. No. I said. Then how was it, Lauren? Because I heard every word you said through the vent. She looked down at her gloved hands. Bradley tried to jump in again. We were just thinking long-term, you know? Security. You'd be taken care of. Taken care of, I repeated, my voice low. By strangers in a facility, while you sold off the last piece of me for an $800,000 payday? They looked like children again. Cornered. Unmasked. Lauren's eyes glistened. I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. You didn't mean to get caught, I corrected. She wiped a tear with the edge of her sleeve. Please. We're homeless now. We've been staying at a friend's house in their basement. The kids are miserable. My jaw tightened. The kids? I asked. You mean my grandchildren? The ones you never brought over except for birthdays and the occasional guilt trip? She nodded quickly. I've made mistakes. I know that. But you taught me better than this. You always said family matters. I leaned forward, finally sitting across from them. I did. And I meant it. But I never said family gets to abuse, manipulate, and discard the people who raised them. That's not family. That's opportunism. Bradley stiffened. So you're just done with us, then? I stared into his eyes. No. I'm done with who you became. If that changes, maybe there's a door to reopen. Lauren burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. I let her cry. Not because I was cruel, but because I wasn't going to coddle away her shame. That's how we got here in the first place. Eventually, she looked up. Can we earn your trust again? That surprised me. But I saw something roar in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Maybe for the first time, she wasn't performing. That depends, I said. You'll need to get jobs. Separate housing. No handouts. No cosigns. And no assumptions. You will rebuild trust the way it's supposed to be built. Slowly. Honestly. With effort. They nodded, too quickly, but I didn't stop them. Let them hope. Let them struggle. It would be good for them. I'll think about Christmas, I added softly, standing again. Lauren looked up, confused. Christmas. Next year, I said. If you've shown real change by then. She opened her mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Bradley stood awkwardly. Guess we'll find a ride back. I nodded. The station's a mile down the road. Good luck. They stepped toward the door slowly. Lauren turned back one more time. I'm sorry, Mom. I know, I said. I just hope you're sorry for the right things. They left without another word. And I returned to the window, watching them vanish into the snow like unfinished sentences. The fire crackled behind me. And for the first time in years, I finally felt whole. I had never cooked a roast that slowly before. 12 hours in the oven, garlic clove studded, basted every hour with red wine and rosemary. As the meat fell apart beneath the fork, I remembered what it used to feel like to prepare Sunday dinner for people who actually loved me. For Sarah, for Michael, for family. But tonight, this wasn't for love. This was for closure. The kitchen was glowing warm, the table set like something out of a magazine, linen napkins, crystal glasses, my mother's best silver. I even pulled out the antique candelabras Bradley once mocked for being medieval. I made sure they were polished to a blinding gleam. Every plate was positioned with military precision, just as I remembered Sarah doing for holiday dinners. Lauren and Bradley didn't know I was home. I'd let them believe I was off on a recovery retreat, after that staged fainting spell I'd performed before they returned from Hawaii. I left the back door unlocked, right where they'd expect it, and the note I left on the counter was deliberately vague. Just enough to sell the story. They'd assumed I was weak, grieving, broken. And in a way, I had been. But something hardened in me after I transferred the house deed, not to them, but to a private family trust one controlled completely. The same trust that now owned every inch of the land, including the garden Bradley planned to bulldoze for a home spa. They had no idea the equity line was closed. The house wasn't a jackpot anymore. It was a well-fortified fortress. My fortress. At exactly 6 p.m., I heard their car pull in, Lauren's SUV, the one I bought just to keep the grandkids safe. Doors slammed. Voices floated in. They stepped into the house as if it still belonged to them, not noticing the way the air felt different. Cleaner. Calmer. Mom. Lauren called. We didn't know you were back early. I appeared in the hallway like a ghost in soft pink cashmere. I thought I'd surprise you, I said, smiling sweetly. Bradley's mouth fell open. You're cooking. Come in, I gestured toward the dining room. You're just in time. Their eyes widened when they saw the table. I could see the questions forming. Why the good china? Why the wine? Why does she look composed? I poured them each a glass of Bordeaux and sat down at the head of the table. Eat, I said. It's your favorite. Just like Sarah used to make. They hesitated. Go on, I encouraged, with a calm that bordered on unnerving. You've earned this. The meal began in silence. Forks clinked against china. Bradley chewed like a man trying to decode a threat in every bite. Lauren kept glancing at her phone, her fingers twitching to text someone, likely Margaret. Mom, Lauren said eventually, setting her fork down. Why did you come back early? I sipped my wine. Oh, just missed my garden. My independence. My house. Bradley chuckled nervously. That reminds me. We actually wanted to talk about something. I spoke with Zachary Allen this morning. The real estate agent? I asked, tilting my head. Lauren smiled, missing the venom behind my calm. Yes. We want to move forward with selling the house. We think it's time, and since everything is basically gone, I interrupted gently. They blinked. Gone. Lauren repeated. Yes, I said, standing. Everything you thought you had lined up, the inheritance, the sale, the nursing home plans. Gone. Bradley scoffed. What are you talking about? I walked to the sideboard and pulled out the folder. Neatly labeled. Witnessed. Notarized. I slid the papers across the table. I moved the house into a trust. The trust is protected. Legally. Irrevocably. You no longer have a claim to any part of this property. Their faces froze. What? Lauren whispered. I know about Sunset Manor. I know about the deposit you paid. I know about the lies. About how you laughed while planning to exile me. Bradley stood, knocking his chair over. You can't do this. I raised my glass. Already did. For a moment, there was only the sound of the grandfather clock ticking down the seconds of their illusion. You're paranoid, Lauren snapped. We were only thinking of your health. My health. I said, my voice rising. You mean the way you discussed my age like it was a terminal disease? The way you planned to dispose of me while sunbathing on a Hawaiian beach paid for by my utilities? I can explain, Bradley began. You really can't. I reached under the table and pulled out a padded envelope, tossing it next to their plates. Lauren opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, screenshots, audio files, every plan, every conversation, every degrading comment recorded with timestamps and transcripts. Lauren's lips moved soundlessly. Bradley went pale. I'm not just a retired teacher, I said. I was a department head. I ran disciplinary hearings. You thought I couldn't outsmart two entitled children with Google Calendars and real estate apps. They looked genuinely stunned. Elaine, we were just, Lauren began. No, I said, cutting her off. You were just calculating how quickly you could erase me. I was just finishing your dinner while preparing your eviction. What? Bradley barked. I want you out. In 24 hours. You can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go. Lauren's voice cracked. You should have thought about that when you started practicing betrayal over brunch. She stood abruptly. You're heartless. I stood too, slowly, with dignity. And you, my daughter, are reckless. You traded a mother for a mansion and lost both. Lauren's voice shook. You'll regret this. I leaned in, face close to hers. I already regretted trusting you. Now I'm just reclaiming what's mine. They left shortly after. No dessert. No hugs. No fake holiday cheer. That night, I sat in the same kitchen, candlelight flickering around the empty table. I should have felt grief. I should have cried. But I didn't. I felt relief. I was 62. Not ancient. Not disposable. And certainly not powerless. The next morning, the house felt different. Lighter. I walked barefoot through the living room, sunlight pouring through the windows that Bradley once insisted needed blackout curtains for better gaming. The silence was not empty, it was sacred. By 10 a.m., the moving truck arrived. Not for me. For them. They didn't believe me at first, thought I was bluffing. Lauren even had the audacity to call Zachary, the real estate agent, hoping he'd vouch for their ownership. He politely informed her that the deed transfer into a private trust had gone through weeks ago, with full legal authority. I had made sure every document was watertight. And the name on the trust? The Sarah Dawson Foundation for Women in Transition. I smiled as I watched Lauren's face crumple in the driveway. She screamed something about betrayal and abandonment, but I didn't respond. I was on the porch, sipping mint tea from Sarah's favorite ceramic mug, wearing her old cardigan like armor. The kids, my grandchildren, clung to Lauren's waist, confused and teary. I didn't blame them. They were still young, still salvageable. Victims of entitlement handed down like a family heirloom. I knelt down as they shuffled toward the car and hugged them both gently. I slipped folded notes into each of their coat pockets. When you're older, and ready to understand what love really looks like, come find me. I'll always be your Grandma Elaine. Bradley refused to make eye contact. Good. Let him carry that shame. Once the last box was packed into the trunk, Lauren turned around sharply. You'll die alone in that house, she hissed. I smiled. If I do, it'll be with peace and a clear conscience. Can you say the same? She didn't answer. The SUV backed out slowly. No one waved. The exhaust curled into the morning air like a final goodbye. When the driveway was empty, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 5 years. 3 weeks later. It didn't take long to make the house feel like mine again. I redecorated, not extravagantly, just intentionally. I took down all the soulless decor Lauren installed to make the place modern. No more abstract art in gold frames. No more beige on beige palettes. I painted Sarah's reading nook pale blue, the way she'd always wanted. And the photos? I reframed them. No longer cropped out, no longer shoved to the edges. My face, my presence, was restored. Word spread quickly in town. Whispers about Elaine kicking them out. I didn't correct anyone. Let the rumors run. Let people wonder how a 62-year-old retired teacher managed to outwit 2 middle-aged leeches and their real estate schemes. Then one afternoon, I got a knock on the door. A woman in her 40s stood there, smiling warmly. She introduced herself as Tara, a coordinator from a local nonprofit that supports older women dealing with financial abuse and manipulation. She'd heard about what I did, how I protected my assets, how I stood up to family pressure, and she asked if I would be willing to speak at their upcoming seminar. Speak? I asked, blinking. She nodded. We need women like you, Elaine. Women who don't go quietly. I said yes. A month later, I stood at a podium in a modest community center. The audience was full of women, gray-haired, tired-eyed, but fierce. Survivors of similar stories. Widows, divorcees, single mothers who'd sacrificed everything and then been told to fade quietly into the background. I told them what happened. Every detail. The crowd didn't gasp. They nodded. Because they knew. After my speech, one woman came up with tears in her eyes and said, "You reminded me I'm not invisible." I hugged her tight. That night, I sat on my porch again, beneath the same stars Sarah and I used to point at from our rocking chairs. I imagined her beside me, laughing at the absurdity of it all. You always said you were soft, I whispered to the breeze. Turns out I'm steel. 1 year later. The house wasn't empty anymore. It echoed with new voices, women I housed through the foundation. Not as tenants, but as guests finding their footing again. One had just left an abusive marriage. Another was trying to finish nursing school at 50. They each stayed for a few months, rent-free, with dignity and warmth. And every Christmas, the table was full again. Not with blood relatives, but with chosen family, women who knew what it was like to be discarded, and who chose to rise anyway. We made toasts with cider instead of champagne. We passed around stories instead of gifts. And when someone asked, Elaine, do you ever miss them? I always answered honestly. I miss the idea of them, not the reality. One final note. 6 months ago, I received a letter. It was from my granddaughter, Emma, the one who used to sit on my lap while I read Charlotte's Web. She wrote, in shaky middle school cursive, Grandma, I found your note. Mom says you're mad at her. I don't really understand grown-up things, but I understand missing you. I hope we can have hot chocolate again sometime. I cried for the first time in a long while. I replied the next day, yes, sweetheart. Let's start with hot chocolate. And build from there. Epilogue. They say family is everything. But I've learned something more powerful. Family is not who shares your blood. It's who shares your truth. And sometimes it takes losing everything, your status, your comfort, your illusions, to finally find the freedom you deserve. So the next time someone tells you you're too old to fly, remember this. Some of us were born with wings you can't see. And we never needed permission to soar.